An employee earns wages for a month based on the total number of hours worked and the rate of pay. So just reading the first line and a half, I can see that there's some wages that the employee is earning, and that is made up of the total number of hours. So it has hours and the rate at which he gets paid. Normal working hours are from 1 to 40 and are paid at the normal rate. So if he works anything from 1 up to 40 hours, then he gets paid at a normal rate. All hours above 40 are seen as overtime hours and are paid at the overtime rate, which is the normal rate times 1.5. So multiplying it by the rate by 1.5, this is an additional amount that the person will earn for those hours that are above the normal number of hours. So if the employee is greater than 40 hours, then there is overtime. So your task here is to write a program to input the rate of pay. So we need to ask the user to enter the rate of pay, how much of money he will be earning per hour. And this rate, that's the rate per hour, and the total number of hours worked. And how many hours has the employee worked? Find and output the wages the employee will earn for the month. So there are two inputs. The first input is the rate, and the second input is the number of hours that the person has worked. Let's try and understand this question a bit better. So we need to input the rate. So the user will tell us the rate, and that rate, the rate of pay, it's the rate of pay for the month. And then we have to input the number of hours. So we don't have too many problems with the rate, but the hours, they talk about two types of hours. They talk about the normal hours. The normal hours are from 1 to 40. And those are the normal hours, and you paid at the normal rate. But if you have greater than 40 hours, for example, from 41 onwards, 41, 42, etc., that means you have overtime hours. So if the person worked for 41 hours, it means that 40 hours were normal and 1 hour was overtime. So for this 1 hour, the employee should be paid at the rate. This is the rate, the normal rate, but we have to also multiply that by 1.5. So the employee gets the overtime, which is a bit more than the normal. But for the employee to be in this category, the first 40 hours is a normal rate. And the number of overtime hours, this is the overtime hours, the person is paid at the rate times 1.5. So the first part, if it's the normal rate, it's just simply the rate times the hours in that case, because there's no overtime involved. But the minute you've got overtime, then there's two parts to it. So let's look at another overtime case. Let's assume the person works 50 hours. And let's take an example of the rate being 100 rands per hour. So this is your rate. and these are your hours, 50. So in this case, the 50 hours is made up of 40 normal working hours, and it's made up of 10. So here I'm just going to put, these are my normal working hours, and these are my overtime hours. So these 40 normal hours, I need to multiply that by the rate, because those are normal hours. I need to multiply that by 100. But these 10 overtime hours, I should multiply that by the rate, but I should also then multiply it. I should then also multiply it by 1.5. So that then gives the employee an extra amount that they will be earning. So to solve this problem, we have two cases, and that is where the checking needs to come in. We need to make a special check to see whether the number of hours is above 40 or whether it is below 40, and do the calculations based on that. This is how you would go about solving a question of this nature. Let's look at the answer, how this would work out. So here is the input for the rate and the input for the number of hours. Because this is a money value, I've kept the rate to be float, which allows me to put a point in it. And the number of hours, I'm working on the assumption it's going to be an integer. I kept it as an int. The question did not tell me whether it should be integer or not. I was comfortable keeping it as an integer. So my first check is if the hours are less than equal to 40. In this category where the hours are less than or equal to 40, this means that there is no overtime. So if there is no overtime, the salary is simply the number of hours that I've input times the rate that I've also input, and I get the salary. So that's the easy case to work out. There is no overtime. And notice I said less than or equal to. So if the user enters 40 hours, 40 is equal to 40, and that would come into this case where I would take the 40 hours times the rate that the user has input. When it goes to the else, it means that the if condition in line 4 was false. Now for the condition to be false, it means that the hours are above 40. So if the hours are above 40, remember the example I took with 50, the first 40 hours are normal, and this is the difference. That's the difference, which is your overtime. So this now works out the first 40 hours, which are normal working hours. So that's 40 times the rate that the user has input. The next part gets the number of overtime hours. So this is the total number of hours in line 2 that we've input, minus 40, because remember, the first 40 hours are normal hours. So take that out of the total number of hours. This will give you the overtime number of hours. And that is the 10 hours if you had entered 50. So it's that number of hours times the rate that we've input in line 1 times the 1.5. So that is the extra bit that they are getting for those overtime hours. And put that all together, that would then give me the salary. Keep in mind that the computer would make use of BODMAS. So when it makes use of BODMAS, all of this, I didn't need the bracket, but all of that is performed as one calculation. And then here I used a bracket, and that is performed as one calculation as well. And those two calculations are then added up together, and I'm then outputting the salary. So if I look at this case here, the rate is 100. The number of hours worked is 20. So if I enter 20 hours, that means in line 4, the condition is true. 20 is less than. It's less than 40. So it's simply hours, which is 100 times 20, giving me 2,000. Let's look at the second example. I took a rate again of 100. This time round, we've got 50 hours. Remember, that's the 40 hours normal plus the 10 hours that are overtime. So when I check my condition, is 50 less than equal to 40? The condition is false. So I go immediately into the else. The first 40 hours are multiplied at the rate, in this case 100. That's going to give me 4,000. And then the next hours, which is 50 minus 40, so that's the 10 hours. 10 hours times the rate, which is 100, times 1.5. So 10 times 100, that give me 1,000. 1,000 times 1.5 will give me 1,500. Take those two and add them up. So we've got 4,000 plus 1,500, giving us 5,500. And if we look at our output, the salary is 5,500. So anything that goes into the else, which at line 6 means your hours are above 40, there is overtime. The overtime is calculated together. This is where the overtime is calculated together with the normal hours that will be the first 40 hours. I hope you understand how to go about working something of this nature, whereby the overtime is made up of two parts.